aged from 20 to 30, and we are driving dialogue, actions, and change in our cities, but we're part of a global community, the Global Shapers community. So there are many hubs in the world, and we also collaborate with shapers everywhere in the world. So we're currently based in Paris and driving actions on sustainability, education, as well as diversity and inclusion. And so as part of our actions, these conferences are organized to help women thrive in their careers, but they're also open to men, obviously. So I hope this session will be very interesting to all our guests. And thank you so much for being here today with us. I will leave the floor to our moderators.
Yes, amazing. Thank you, Fanny, for this introduction of the Global Shapers. Shameless promotion. We have a lot of events like this one, so feel free to follow us on social media. And I will now introduce this specific initiative that this event is taking place within, if I may say. So basically, this event is part of an initiative called the Shaper Talks webinar series. And basically, this initiative has been created and launched by a few members of the Global Shapers Paris Hub, basically to organize events, specifically webinars these days, we all know why, around the topic of women empowerment, and specifically women empowerment in the workplace, organizing, different webinars on specific topics to give the tools to women of all ages to thrive in the workplace. And this is valid for people working in France, but people working all over the world. This is why we have a very international attendees list tonight, and an international panel as well. So thank you, Martina, Ernst, and Kate Dixon for being here today. We're very happy to have you. Maybe before starting with all the questions that we've received from our attendees today, I'm just going to quickly introduce both of you because you have very diverse backgrounds. So starting with Martina. So Martina is the president of the Vienna University's Female Leaders Network and is also the vice president of the Vienna University's Executive Academy International Advisory Board. Martina has founded Salary Negotiations, which is a consulting, training, and coaching company whose primary goal is to help all professionals get a higher salary or improve their career. So right on the topic of this session on the art of salary negotiation. And Martina has also founded Colorful Career, which is a business coaching and career development platform. So thank you, Martina, for being here with us today. And to complement this panel, we have Kate Dixon. So Kate is a certified coach and the author of many books related to leadership and being successful at work, including your latest publication, Pay Up, Unlocking the Secrets of Salary Negotiation. So again, right in the middle of our conversation here today. So after spending the past 25 years working for and consulting with leaders in for-profit companies and NGOs, Kate is now the principal and founder of Dixon Consulting, a leadership development and total rewards consultancy that specializes, among other things, in salary negotiation, coaching, and compensation solutions for companies ranging from startups to Fortune 100 companies. So a very specialized and expert panel with us today. Maybe starting with the first question that most of us, I think, here are wondering is one of the first things we think about before beginning a salary negotiation is a feeling of unease. We're not comfortable with the idea of asking for a salary increase. So what are some tips that you would give us here tonight to avoid this unease? And what angle would you recommend us taking before starting the discussion with our manager? So maybe starting by alphabetical order. Kate, if you want to start, I will leave the mic to you.
Sure. So Thanks so much for the great introduction, and I'm excited to be here. I think one of the biggest things that we can do when we're asking for more money from our boss is to really understand the value that we're bringing. So, you know, a lot of people think about, oh, I want to focus on fairness and all of that kind of jazz. But what you're really trying to do is sell your manager on giving you more money. And one of the best ways to do that is really to highlight the value that you're bringing to the company and to the team that you're on. And so if you're really clear about that value, and focus on the value, it's going to be a lot easier, and it's going to take some of the emotional tension out of the conversation as well.
Amazing, very clear. What about you, Martina? What advice would you give us?
I fully endorse what Kate was saying. And I want to just simply add one thing, because whenever I talk to anyone about salary negotiations, I see their faces like horrible faces. And then I just tell them it's not like going to the dentist, even if it feels like this, because after all, the employer wants the same as you do. They want you super motivated on board and want to make sure that you help the company be successful. And this is what relates to what Kate was saying. It's about the added value. And you do not have to think that you need to brag, because most people say, I'm shy, I'm timid, I hate negotiating, I never do that. And then I say, it's all fine. Be shy, be timid, don't think about negotiating. Be the way you are and focus fully on what the employer needs. And I think that's what you said, Kate. It really takes off the pressure of our shoulders, because then we are all good in serving people and serving the company's goals. And I think when we focus on this, we will just get what we deserve.
Mm-hmm. I love the optimism. No, for sure. So when you were saying that, you know, we're all good, I guess this is a good transition to my next question, because among our audience today, so we have women of all ages and we have men as well. But we have an audience that is relatively young and relatively, you know, junior. So two questions that are linked. Let us know if there are any differences in your answers. But first of all, what would you recommend to someone who is about to negotiate their first salary? You know, what tips do you have on this? And then for internal junior promotions, when the person is not an expert yet on the topic, again, what tips would you give to this person? So maybe Martina, you can start with this question.
So first of all, let's assume you are not yet in the company and you are an applicant. Once you are in the interview, it shows that the company wants a person with your profile. This means it doesn't matter whether you're 20 or 25 or 50. Once you made it to the interview, the company wants your profile. And then what's the interview all about? The interview is about finding out whether you fit to the company culture. And this is really important. And you yourself should take that really seriously. Don't even think about salary before you do not know whether you fit or don't fit to this company culture. Because you won't achieve anything if you don't fit into the company culture. And I think I see Kate nodding. Another expert who fully agrees with me. And this is really not making things easier than they are in reality, but it's as simple as that. It's about whether you fit into the company culture. And the second thing is whether you are able to demonstrate that you understand everything about the job you will be hired for. And this means, how can you, for example, ask insightful questions about the job so that you understand what it's all about. And then maybe you can even demonstrate that you know a lot about what they want you to do. And maybe you can even add extra value to what they ask you. And this then gives you the range of maneuver when it comes to your salary. whether you are just getting the median, this means the salary which is most often paid for such a position and such a level in the specific country, or whether you can even go a little bit beyond this. And maybe, Kate, you want to add on this?
No, I love what you're saying, because I think that it's really important. And I would even go so far as to say, get really clear before you start, selecting companies that you want to interview with. Get really clear about what it is that you want. From a salary perspective, sure, but that cultural fit is really important. If you share values with the company and the team that you're going to go work with, chances are you're going to be more successful, and that's going to give you a lot of confidence too. So I love what Martina said. And the other piece of advice that I would give is, as you step into salary negotiations, whether it's for a brand new job or in your current position, realize this is a business transaction. It's not personal, and it feels really personal, because it's all about how much you're going to take home in your salary and what you're going to be able to provide to your family. But it's not personal. It's a business transaction. And if you can have your mindset in that space, that allows you some of the emotional distance that you really need to be your best when you're negotiating.
Amazing. Couldn't agree more with what both of you said. So we have a few questions regarding the profile of the person who is asking for a salary negotiation. So, you were just saying that, really, identifying with the cultural fit is a great, factor to put forward. And also we have, some profiles who are very experts in their field. So in this case, the added value is also quite obvious to the employer who will decide or not to give a raise. What advice would you give to profiles that are more generalists, where in this case you have many people doing similar jobs with similar profiles in the same company? How would you put forward the added value of the person in this case?
May I answer?
Absolutely, yeah.
It really does not matter whether you are a generalist or an expert, and it does not matter whether you are a beginner or whether you are far advanced. The only thing which matters is what exactly does the company need you for, and how well will you be able to fit to this task description, and how much added value beyond this normal task description can you provide. For example, let's assume you are a call center agent. So really more or less general, and let's assume it's not a specific call center, it's just you are a generalist in this call center. And it does not matter whether you are a generalist or whether you are maybe in another call center, the super specific expert. The only thing which matters is what were you hired for, and maybe the generalist was hired to be super friendly, to make sure that then the clients to whom he talks or she talks are looking to fix an appointment with a specialist. So this generalist will be considered and qualified only and evaluated only for the number of calls he's putting through. And maybe the super expert, he is there to quantify risk. So he's exclusively evaluated regarding the risk profile he's having. So at the end, you just need to know what is my task? How well am I doing this? And maybe I can offer something beyond this normal task, because maybe my rate of customers who is then willing to fix another appointment is exceptionally high. And then what I would really recommend is, because often we are thinking that what we do is just normal. So sit down maybe once a week and think about what is it they expect you to do, what is it you did, and maybe what was exceptional, and make a little list. Because once a year when you go and have your career development talks, you should be prepared to not brag, but to simply mention what you were doing to help the company improve or succeed.
Yeah, and to kind of build on that, I think as you look at what your team is required to do, and what, as you get into larger and larger jobs, what is the organization trying to do? What is their mission? What is their purpose? Right? And the more that you can tie what you're doing into those greater goals, the more value you'll be able to show and demonstrate, which is really super important. And again, one of the things I love about what Martina's saying is, really focus on yourself, focus on the value that you bring, rather than focusing on comparing yourself to somebody else who does the same thing, or, it's just that comparison trap is a little bit of a black hole that doesn't really serve you. And I do think too that it is important to think about things that you do well, and how those do differentiate yourself. So, things that come really easily to you, don't dismiss those just because they're easy for you, because they may not be things that are easy for everyone. And they may be something that the company really values. For instance, I love brainstorming more than just about anything else that I do in a day. And I was in my 30s before I realized that not everybody loves brainstorming and not everybody's all that great at it. And I just thought that was something that came built in with everybody, and it doesn't. So, to really highlight my power of ideation and creativity is something that was really important for me in my career.
Absolutely. And I think what you also should take into consideration is, because I hear that you're a little bit afraid of being young and then not being valuable enough. On the contrary, Kate and me, we are a bit more experienced, but I hear many people
the art of negotiation, but
that they're really afraid already to experience. Because nowadays, what companies need, they need a diverse workforce with young and more experienced people, and they need people who are able to drive innovation and digitalization. And who is best fit for it? Normally not the more experienced ones. So I think be happy to be young, and anyhow, you will not be invited for jobs you're not fit at. So.
Amazing. Again, love the optimism. I'm sure all the young people are thankful for hearing these words from you, Martina. But yeah, no, and I love the idea of not falling into the comparison trap, Kate, for sure. I think something, out of my mind right now is closely related to that, being the imposter syndrome. That there's a point where you have to think about you and what you bring and your added value, and we all have something to bring forward. So yeah, let's stay on this optimistic note. Now, a very interesting question also to cover is regarding the difference in cultures. So we have a lot of nationalities and locations represented here tonight, as I was mentioning earlier on. So some cultures and some companies themselves are very transparent with wages disclosure, but others aren't. So how can we overcome difficulties associated with company opacity regarding wages and potentially uncertain estimations of the job markets? So, based on your experience, how would you recommend tackling this issue of opacity linked to the culture, the work culture of the country you work in? Maybe Kate, if you want to begin with.
Yeah, so I spent most of my career in corporate compensation, and I've seen the idea of transparency shift and change over time. In fact, my first job was with a government agency, and their practice was so transparent that they published a list of everybody's salaries, that anybody could go and look in this book, right? And I thought, wow, that's crazy. I never had seen anything like that. And to be honest, I haven't seen a lot of that since. But what I do know is that there are countries that it's really common for people to just come and talk to each other about what they make and what kind of an increase they got. And it's not something that we do here in the United States all that much, although it's becoming more common. And I think one of the things that we're noticing is with, the internet and crowdsourced data around salaries, that it's becoming a lot more easily accessible data, or, in general. And I think that, companies should be more transparent, and you as an employee can encourage your employer to be more transparent. It's one of the things that I am doing a lot of consulting around now is, really things that equalize, access to pay information, so that people who've been traditionally marginalized by pay, like women and people of color, are provided the tools that they need to advocate on their own behalf. So again, I think the trend is toward more transparency. Again, some countries do a better job than others. Some of it is all kind of in through employees themselves. Some of it's through the employers, but it's definitely something. If you and your colleagues really want to see more of that, talk to your managers about it. Let people know that that's important to you. And, again, I think that we're starting to see this stuff open up.
Yes, and I would love to add, there was, for example, last year, the EU, the European Community, they spent a lot of money to fund special initiatives in different countries to talk about equal pay in Europe. So I think this is the trend. Companies are now much more pushed and forced, I would say positively, to open up, to be transparent, and maybe not when it comes to the salary of Mr. So-and-so and Mrs. So-and-so, but at least to give a transparency about the salary compensation procedures. So to understand as an employee, how do they conceive and design salaries, and what is the process where I could get an increase. And then what you also could do is, if your boss doesn't seem to be accessible, talk to HR. They run the salary compensation processes. Talk to maybe the Works Council, because the Works Council is entitled to see the salaries. Talk to the trade unions, depending on the country, because in some countries you have the trade unions, not the Works Council. And then I was checking in France, there is this website called apec.fr, APEC, APEC. And then glassdoor.com is really a good start. It's an international site where you can just say, I'm based in Austria, in Germany, in France, in the States. And it gives you a really good indication of what your salary, of what the bandwidth of your salary should be. Because don't think it's one figure, it's always a bandwidth. It goes from a minimum, which often is the collective bargaining agreement minimum, and it goes to a maximum, which normally, and Kate, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, is a historical maximum. So it's a salary which won't be paid anymore at this level, because maybe someone was downgraded, sits on a position for years, and no one else would get such a salary, because anyhow it's a like a statistical outlier. So but then you find out what is the median of this job and this specific level, and median means the salary paid most often for such a position and such a level in this country.
Yeah, and I think most companies have pretty similar kinds of ways to set salary ranges, and they look at salary surveys which are done by consulting firms that incorporate data from all kinds of different employers, and then there is some market rate that's established. That's usually the 50th percentile or the median amount of the range, although it can be, it doesn't necessarily have to be the middle of the range, especially in Europe where there are these contract minimums and stuff like that. But yeah, I think getting familiar what the market is for the kind of work you do is really important, because that can be your starting point when you're asking for more pay at your current job or when you're talking to people in your salary negotiation. So what I recommend to my salary negotiation coaching clients is to approach it in a matter like, my research shows that jobs like this are paid between X and Y in the market. Based on my experience, I'm targeting the high end of that range. How close can we get? And, that kind of phrasing, there's a lot of neuroscience in that, but the idea of how close can we get, or what kind of flexibility do you have? Those are really important questions because they're not yes/no questions. So, the yes/no questions tend to short circuit in hiring managers or HR people's brains. And so it's like really easy to say, oh, do you have any flexibility? No, I don't. Can you move the salary up? No, I cannot. Don't ask yes or no questions. Ask things that like kind of short circuit that idea in their brain. What kind of flexibility do I have? Oh, I don't know. Let me think about the flexibility. How close can we get? I'm going to have to think about that. That's what you want. Again, it might not change the answer, but at least slows down the process enough in the person you're negotiating with to give your idea a fighting chance.
Exactly. And I love what you say, because it's a win-win situation. At the end, the employer doesn't want to frustrate you. It just does. It simply has to be reasonable. And Kate, you were mentioning it. Formulate things like, what can we do? Put the other person, bring the other side on your side. So make it a we thing, and not, you don't want to pay me this, but I want to have this. And think about the flexible range where maybe you don't get exactly what you want now, but think of it in a kind of a process view also, because it can be that you settle at a certain amount now, but then you already fix the conditions, what you could get in the next 6 months or 12 months. So I think be patient, because if you want to grow within this company, give them also a chance to help you grow, and then adjust your salary accordingly. And then think of benefits as well. Because maybe sometimes the company's hands, maybe in COVID times, they really cannot give you an increase now, even if they wanted to, but they could maybe give you more holidays, more vacation days. So why not, Think a little bit broader, because at the end, if you get one extra vacation day, it's also money.
Okay, sounds great. I think we have a lot of food for thought already, and it's not about to stop, if I may say, because we're exactly halfway through the session. So thank you for answering to these questions that were prepared by our team from the Global Shapers. And now we will open the Q&A session. So feel free to put your questions in the comments, and I will already start because we have a few questions already. Maybe some questions that come up quite often, or came up quite often since we started this session already, is how do you know how far you can take a negotiation without risking losing the opportunity to have the salary increase? And similarly, is there a rule of thumb on how many iterations of back and forth you can make when you go for this sort of discussion? So maybe, Kate, do you want to start if you feel inspired, or as you wish?
Yeah, sure. So I have been in the compensation field for, let's say, a lot of years. I have never seen an offer pulled for people negotiating. So that's one of the myths that people come to me with. It's like, oh, I kind of want to negotiate, but I'm afraid that they will pull the offer if I try to. And again, I've never seen that happen. That said, it's really important to be situationally aware of what's going on with the person that you're negotiating with. And so I always recommend that my clients negotiate over the phone. I don't recommend that they do it over video because there's too much input and it's hard. It's hard for people to focus and concentrate. So, but over the phone, it's easier to hear shifts in tone and you can kind of get a sense for if somebody's getting frustrated. My first rule of salary negotiation is don't be a jerk. So you don't want to, go in there and bang the drum, I need to have this. And if you don't give me this, then you don't value me and blah, blah, blah. Right. So, if you can get in there and first, express delight, let them know you're delighted to have an offer. And P.S. by the way, when you get an offer, just like Martina was saying earlier, they want you. So this is not like a battle that you should be like, I can only win if you lose and that kind of business. So, again, if you're really collaborative, start off by saying, hey, I'm really delighted to have this offer. I'm glad that you think this is as good of a fit as I do. That's a great way to start out. Iterations, it depends, right? My clients typically will, and it depends on how complex the offer is too, because my executives sometimes have to go through a number of stages, but it's generally, one stage is around, pay and equity and things like that. And then another is on relocation and another is on employment terms, right? But that's kind of for a really complex thing. For most of my clients, what happens is they get the offer, they have a conversation where they, ask the questions that they need, and then they make the requests that they would like. And then almost always the recruiter or the hiring manager goes back to whoever's going to approve this to make the case, which is another reason why you want to not be a jerk, right? Is because you want this person to advocate for you well. And they're going to come up with what they think is a counteroffer that makes sense if they can make any movements, which sometimes they can't, but sometimes they can. So they come back and make the counteroffer, and then if you have to continue to negotiate, you can, but most negotiations that I have seen stop at that point. And that was my experience when I was internal to companies as well, that it would be, ask for things, they go back and see what they can do and come back. I think more than that is kind of a diminishing returns thing, because remember too, you're really trying to, this is the first opportunity that you have to show the kind of person and the kind of thought leader that you are with this new company. And so, this is a continuing relationship that you want to nurture. So, you want to do it with grace, as well as finesse.
Let me add only, this is fully true when it comes to being new in the company, unless you were like asked for by a headhunter. For example, in case a headhunter picks you out, asks you whether you want to join this company, then you meet the company and they really want you on board. But what they offer you is not what you are really aspiring at and what the market position and the market value could still, the range of the market value is still bigger than what they offer. Then I think you can be a bit bolder. So it really depends on where you are at. When you know that they absolutely want you on board. For example, in my case, I remember in my last position, the company absolutely wanted me to be on board, and they offered me 30% less than I wanted. So I said, I'm sorry, but I'm sure we will find a solution. So it took us really 2 weeks with the head of HR, and we went back and forth, and I always said, we are almost there. Don't be frustrated, we will get there. And we found a very creative solution, but it took us 2 weeks.
Yeah, and to tag on to that, I mean, I think the thing that's really beautiful about what you did in that is to, again, bring that we together, right? I'm confident that we're going to land on a great solution that works for both of us, because guess what? That's what everybody wants, right? And so that's really, really important to let them know that this isn't like, I am the queen, and you may, you as my subject may present things to me, and then I will decide yes or no. I mean, it's really, hey, let's collaborate on this offer so that we can both feel great about it, because that's what the company wants, and that's what you want.
Exactly, because it's all about cost at the end. You want a fair compensation, which is related to the market value, and the company wants to pay a price related to the market value within the cost structure.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah. And, I mean, sometimes things are a little bit different than you expect. Like I had a client last year who, it was the executives had all taken cuts for COVID and all this kind of stuff. And she was saying, well, I really want bigger base pay than they offered me, because that's what the market is worth. And so, we planned a strategy for her. And, she asked for what she wanted, and the recruiter was like, I don't know that we're going to be able to get this, but let me get creative. And so she went out and came back with a 5% increase to her base and bonus, which is fine, right? But then she had this humongous increase to the sign-on equity that was completely unexpected. So yeah, she would have preferred, if she was drawing up the thing, she would have liked to have more in base pay, but this equity, like, completely made it worth her while to accept the offer. And so sometimes you're going to find that that's what happens, is that you may not get exactly what you want, but you might get something that's even better.
Maybe jumping on this perfect transition between what we want and what we could have that could be better. So sometimes, and hopefully most of us, will be in a situation where they already are in a good job or in a job, and they have an opportunity to leave this company for another firm that eventually, offers a higher salary. In the amount where you would like to renegotiate your current salary at your current company without, burning bridges with this company. How would you approach this conversation? How would you launch the dialogue?
So I think that it's important to always, whenever it's about salary negotiations, I would rather advise to not call it like this, but to talk about your career development within the company, and say my short to midterm development, because very often companies have the tendency to say yes, 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 but then it's like postponed to the day you will never survive. So make sure you ask for a specific meeting talking about your short to midterm career development within the company. And then you say, you confirm how loyal you are. You make sure that you agree with your supervisor about the goals you have achieved and that they see it the same way, to make sure that you are aware that they really appreciate you as much as you think they do. So get this clear. And then you can say, listen, I want to really plan my future with your company, and I have the feeling you have the same interest, but I have to say that I'm quite heavily approached by the market. And this is, the tone of voice sets the environment. If it comes across like a threat, you are like dead. And then I think many companies prefer you out than in. But if it comes across like a fact, and the companies are not stupid, when you have a specific job, like assume nowadays artificial intelligence analyst, Every company needs these positions desperately. And let's assume you started there some years ago and at the time the job was not so sexy as it is now. Then of course you approached constantly by other companies. And this is a fact your employer is aware of. So you should then say, okay, listen, what can we do? Because I really want to stay. But I have to admit, look at this. And you can show him, you can even show the offer so that the employer sees, aha, he does not brag and does not invent things, but he really talks about facts. And you can say, listen, I don't want to threaten you. It's just a fact. I get these offers all the time. I want to stay here. I feel well. I think I fit into your culture. I can bring added value to you. So what can we do to get my salary adjusted and to advance my career? And honestly, as an employer would be stupid not to act on this. And it might be that there are certain time constraints and he cannot act immediately, but maybe he says, listen, we can do it in writing, but it will be effective as of, I don't know, first of in 3 months, 6 months. But I think this is what you can expect from your employer when you sit down and talk honestly but openly.
Yeah, I love that approach. And two, I think the time to have those discussions is early. I would rather have a conversation like that with somebody who worked for me before they actually had an offer in their hand, right? Because at that point, you've already you've already interviewed and they already want to move forward. So I think it's more effective if you say, hey, look, I'm getting all these headhunter calls. And the numbers that they're talking about are, 20% or 30% higher than what I'm making right now. I really, that's not my interest. My interest is to stay here. If that's the case, if it's not, then, go ahead and pursue those other things. But I think, that checking to see if the organization values you the way that you think and hope that they do is really important, because sometimes they don't. And AI is super hot right now, but it may not be critical to the mission of the organization. So if it's not, chances are you're not going to be able to get them to pay as much for your kind of job as you would if AI is mission critical to the intellectual property or the drives of the company. So that's all I would say in terms of adding on.
Amazing. Sounds great. Thank you. So we have 2 questions around an interesting topic in the case where the negotiation did happen, but didn't go as well as it could have. For example, we have a question from Anne-Catherine who says, what if you realize you have not negotiated enough before you accepted the job? When is an appropriate time to renegotiate? And what are some good arguments that you could put forward early on, besides some that you have already mentioned?
My perspective on this is a couple fold. So what I normally hear from people is, well, what if I tell people what my salary requirements are early in the process, and then I realize later that I've underestimated the size of the job or the scope of the role or something like that. Do I have to stick with what I said before? And I would say no, you don't, because and it's okay to let them know as you're closer to the offer, hey, based on what I now know of the role and the benefits or the other kinds of things that come with the pay package, I think my target is higher than what we had originally talked about. I just wanted to let you know that before you put an offer together, right? That's completely legitimate. If you feel like you negotiate and you accepted something that you don't feel really comfortable with, it's a little harder to deal with. But being open and honest is important, and you can let your hiring manager know, hey, I realized after I accepted this role that I accepted something that was below market pay. And I'd love for us to review my salary in 3 months or 6 months once you've had a chance to see the kind of great value that I can bring to the role. Those are kind of two approaches that might make sense for you.
Mm-hmm. Sounds great. Martina, do you want to add on what Kate said, or should you go?
Honestly, I just can summarize at the end, the market value is related to the responsibility you have within the company and the impact you are creating in the company. And once you see that your responsibility and impact is much higher than for what you were initially hired, of course, your salary has to be a different one as well. So exactly what, and then just go on with what Kate said.
Sounds great. Now maybe touching a bit on a maybe controversial topic. We have a question that I'm sure will interest a lot of people here. So how do you handle being denied equal salary increases or pay based on your age or on having kids? How do you approach this kind of conversation and this kind of inequality in the salaries or denial of salary increase based on these factors?
Maybe I just go ahead and then Kate will add on to it. So there's one thing you should know. Many corporations pay a kid's allowance once people are parents. This means, for example, two people are hired, they have exactly the same salary. I mean, exactly the same never exists, but more or less the same because they do the same job. And then one of the two, one is single and the other gets a child, first child or second child, doesn't matter. Then normally the company grants a kid's allowance. In many corporations, I've seen that. And then there is no inequality. It's just simply the fact that you have a child, an extra cost, is especially honored by the employer. And so the single who doesn't have a child would feel maybe and would raise the point of unequal pay, but this is really not the case. And normally these kids allowances are very transparent because very often they are negotiated by the Works Council or trade unions. So it's something everyone in the company knows. You can even see, aha, I have one child, I would get this, and I have two children, I get this. So this is something which is not depending on the specific job. And maybe, Kate, you want to add on this?
Yeah, I think that it's very particularly location driven because that doesn't happen in the United States and it doesn't happen in most companies. I mean, in cases of allowances, those do tend to be very transparent, and there are all kinds of crazy allowances that you see all over the world. But to the extent that this is not about mandated allowances and stuff, I think it's more of a challenge. If that's what you're perceiving is that you're getting paid less because you don't have the same family situation. What I would advise people to do in the States is to really, again, talk about yourself relative to market, because I do think that there are a couple of things in here. So the word fair, when you use fair and tie it to pay, tends to trigger and make managers really uncomfortable, because if you say my pay isn't fair, what oftentimes the manager will hear is, manager, you are not acting in integrity. And that is awful. I mean, as a manager, you never want to feel, oh my gosh, that I'm treating people poorly. Nobody wants to do that. I mean, and everybody comes to work trying to do a good job, right? So if you can remove kind of fair from any pay discussion, that will help you a lot. But again, really looking to that outside market to benchmark yourself against, rather than, Susie gets more money than me and I've decided this is why it is and all that kind of stuff. That's really not going to help you, especially if you're wrong about why the differences exist. So the more you can focus on the outside market, the better it is for you. Outside market, and then the inside, what value you're bringing.
Yeah. And then there is one more thing. In the past, and maybe in some state institutions, you still get salary increases due to your seniority. But normally in other corporations, it's not about the seniority in the job. It's really about what is your job and what's the job level in the company, and you're paid uniquely for this. So it's not about I'm here for 10 years and this person is here for 2 years. So I should get, I don't know, 30% more. No. Which job are you employed for? And what is the market value of this position? And how much add-on value do you bring to this position? And these are the criteria for your pay and for your compensation.
Maybe challenging on this situation. What about the situation where you discovered that, so not talking about salary increase anymore, but more salary alignment?
Yeah.
What happens? What do you do when you realize that, you know, your peers at the same level with similar, you know, let's put seniority aside as you were mentioning, but let's, you know, consider that you're working with someone at the same job at the same job, same position. And you discover a salary difference. You know, how do you bring this up with your manager? What techniques to kind of establish the balance here and make sure that you have equal pay with someone at the same level as you?
Let's go back to what Kate exactly said, and it's all 100% true. Do not ever talk about the other person in the company. Talk about yourself. And then knowing that the other person, let's say, has 10% more, shows you there is room for maneuver, which is a super sign. So then specialize, focus on yourself. What can you do to also get these 10% in addition? Because you know it's possible, because the other person just demonstrated it. So don't say, this is unfair and I need to get the same. No. Think about, okay, this person does more or less the same as I do. So think about how can you put your own value into the equation so that you also get the salary increase, because you know it's not out of the blue, it's very realistic.
And just to add on, I mean, one great way that you can, you know, if you can't figure out ideas yourself, engage your manager in that discussion. You know, hey, I'm looking to grow my skills and my value to the company, and I'd like to make more money. What kinds of things would help me really show you my great value to the organization? You know, and again, I think you know, we talked earlier about this as a kind of a career discussion and a development discussion, and focusing on growing your skills and your capabilities and your capacity. You know, those are really kind of appealing things for a manager to talk about with you. And so, you know, again, a lot of times those are the things that will add to your pay, and it might even be developing yourself so that you're ready for the next level. And what would that look like? And you know, engaging them in that development discussion and a career kind of progression discussion, that can really open up the space for conversation.
Sounds great. I'm gonna try to be short. Okay, so I'll just go on with Tanya, because she was one of the people who asked this question. So giving more context, the lack of alignment was because of how past promotions were handled, performance conversations took place, and she was aligned with peers. So in this case,
sorry, if I can be cheeky, I can add more context here. It might be a bit easier saying it Sorry about that. But yeah, promotions in the past were just handled a little bit against me, unfortunately. So that's playing against me now. And I am now trying to, and I had a conversation with my manager about performance and everything. And I am aligned with my peers in terms of performance. But just in terms of wages, I know I am way behind, and I'm trying to not have a conversation with my manager around my performance and what else I can do. I'm a manager myself, so I have to have those conversations with my teammates, obviously, but more around alignment. And I'm just feeling a little bit stuck at the moment with how to take this a step further, rather than going into this threat conversation with here's an offer, what can you offer me now?
You know, I'm gonna jump in here with something that may not be what you really want to hear, but you know, your organization is showing who they are by the decisions that they're making. And if they're reinforcing time after time, you know, when you talk to them, hey, I'd like to make more money, I'm really feeling good about my performance, I feel good about the value, and they're still not coming up with pay for you, at a certain point, you're going to need to decide whether or not you need to leave the company. Because, you know, I think we, especially as women, are socialized to make it work, right? Make everything work. But they are, you know, either sending you direct signals or maybe kind of subtle signals that may indicate that you would be treated from a compensation perspective better and served better at another organization.
Okay, thanks for that. Thank you.
Amazing. So I guess that I could say what some of the main messages for me are. I'm sure it would have more added value if considering the time, we have around 2 minutes, but feel free to take your time. But you know, if there is one last thing that you would like to say to our audience today, you know, like a recap of all the good tips that you gave, you know, what would you prioritize? You know, what message would you like to convey to our audience here tonight? Maybe Martina, do you want to start with this one?
Yeah, I would love you to start from the idea that the employer is not your enemy, and make sure that you establish a win-win attitude. This will help you tremendously. And then it's not about you being the super negotiator or the super person who knows how to brag. It's about what is your market value? Make sure you know about it. How can you add value to the company to make sure that the company is successful? And then if you really are aware of these two concepts, you will earn your worth, because you are worth it to the company and to yourself. Much success.
Yeah, and my big advice is to listen to everything that Martina says, because she's brilliant, and to also not take things personally. You know, it's very hard to have that emotional distance, but that's going to help you a ton. So, you know, the collaboration piece and the emotional distance piece are really key to doing a great job in this world.
Amazing. Love it. Love it. Amazing. So we're right on time. Thank you to all the participants and to our panelists here today. It was really insightful, at least for me, and I'm sure for the rest of our audience. So thank you again so much, Kate and Martina, for your time and for your advice. And to everyone, you are more than welcome to join us for our next Shaper Talk session that will take place next month. And the topic will be revealed on our social media for the Global Shapers Paris Hub. So feel free to follow us. We will make sure to keep on giving you as many tools as possible to thrive in the workplace. So again, thank you so much, Kate and Martina, and have a great week, everyone.
And thanks, Constance, for the wonderful questions. You were a fantastic interviewer. We really enjoyed.
Yes.
The questions were not mine for the majority. So thanks you to everyone who participated in contributing to the great questions. And thanks, Martina. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks.
was a real pleasure. It was great, Kate, to